Hey, this is Dr. Berry. In this short video, I want to talk to you about how the ketogenic diet can most likely help prevent dementia and perhaps even treat it. There's a huge epidemic in the Western world of dementia, both Alzheimer's type and other types. And if we could do something to prevent this epidemic from expanding and possibly even to treat the people with early Alzheimer's and early dementia, wouldn't that be awesome? That's what we're going to talk about today. First, take 1 second and click that subscribe button, please, and then click the little bell right beside it. That way, every time I get a bright idea, you'll be one of the very first to know about it. Now, let's talk about dementia and how we're going to prevent it from ever happening in you, okay? First of all, the human brain and the human body have been on this planet for many, many, many eons, right? It has had to go through desperate times, very lean times, long periods of not having much to eat at all. Sometimes we feast and sometimes we fast, right? The human brain and the human body, in fact, has developed two separate systems in order to fuel itself. One is burning glucose, which we all know about, and what we've been doing in America for the last 50, 60 years is eating a very high carb, whole grain diet, and our body runs on that. We don't die if we eat that, but more and more the research is coming out to show that we probably suffer long term with increased epidemics of chronic disease, of autoimmune disease, and of dementia. So what you want to do is, since your brain can use two separate fuel systems, the first one's glucose, the second one is ketones, right? Our brain has developed this method as a strategy so that when we go through periods of fasting or starvation, when there's just no food around, our brain can switch right over to burning ketones for energy, as can the rest of our body. This is a natural thing. This is not something new. This is something that's been going on since human beings have been human beings on this planet. Okay, so your brain is perfectly happy to burn glucose, and it's also perfectly happy to burn ketones. It doesn't really care which it burns as long as it has one or the other. Now, there's a theory about dementia and Alzheimer's that as people age, as people get older, their brain gets worse and worse at using glucose to fuel itself. It becomes almost unable to efficiently burn glucose as energy anymore. And so the theory is that people with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, their brain's actually starving to death because these people are eating these high carb, whole grain diets and they're not eating any good saturated fats. And so the body it doesn't have enough ketones to fuel the brain. And so even though the person looks like they're well fed, the brain is actually starving. And that's a theory. No one's proved that to be false or true yet, but that's just a theory that I find very intriguing. The next thing is that we used to think that the brain, once it was formed, once you were 25 or so and your brain was fully developed, that was it. You never made new neurons or brain cells. That was the brain that you carried with you for the rest of your life. We now know that that's absolutely false. About every third year, you have completely replaced the cells in your brain. Okay, so every 3 years, you have a new brain. And so with that being said, that's a very important concept to understand. Not only are we just trying to fuel our brain, we're having to rebuild our brain every 2 to 3 years. And so that makes what you eat vitally important because you're not just trying to put fire wood in the fire. You're actually having to rebuild the fireplace every 2 to 3 years. And in order to do that, you have to feed your body the proper things or you can't rebuild your brain properly. And that could lead to long-term chronic issues like dementia. Dementia is something that happens late in life. And so really there's not really a way that evolution or genetics could play a big role in that because really genetic things stop mattering once you get past the age of reproduction, right? Evolution doesn't really reach into old age. There's no evolutionary advantage to doing that because we're not reproducing at that age. And so you can't really blame much of dementia on genetics, right? Now, some of the early dementias that children get that are 1 in 10 million rare, that may have something to do with genetics. I'm talking today exclusively about the dementia of old age and Alzheimer's disease. Here's the kicker. Your brain is made of fat, and your cell membranes are made of fat and cholesterol. Okay, so if your brain is made of fat and you rebuild your brain every 3 years, then wouldn't you need fat to rebuild your brain with? Wouldn't you need cholesterol to make those new cell membranes with? You see my point? And so now that we know that the brain is not a static thing that never changes, it changes all the time. You're making new brain cells every day. And every third year, you've completely replaced your brain with new cells. So you've got to eat fat. You have to eat good, healthy, saturated fat to rebuild your brain with, to build the cell membranes of every cell in your body, right? The nuclear membranes have to have fat or they cannot be rebuilt. So it's really silly to say you need to eat a super low fat diet. In fact, when you look at the curve of dementia, right, it follows perfectly with the curve of people eating high carb whole grain diets. It's the same curve. So maybe there might be a connection there, right? We know that now experts are starting to call dementia diabetes of the brain because it looks like the brain itself becomes resistant to the glucose and the insulin can't push it into the brain cells anymore. So it looks just like type 2 diabetes of the brain. So why don't we just rethink the way we feed our brain and start feeding our brain what it actually needs, which is healthy saturated fats? Studies are showing more and more every day that even small increases in blood sugar levels can really increase your risk of developing dementia. And so type 2 diabetics are at super high risk of developing dementia later in life or even earlier in life. So it's really important that you understand that your brain is made of fat. You replace your brain every 2 to 3 years. And if you don't feed your body the right materials, the right brain building materials to rebuild your brain, then you're going to rebuild an inferior brain, which is more likely to develop dementia later on. Now, if you really enjoy this and you know someone who's getting older, your mom, your aunt, your uncle, please share this with them on their social media because they need to hear this message. For someone in their 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, the clock is ticking. And every day that they don't feed their body what their body needs to build new healthy brain cells, they're a little closer to dementia. Okay. So also, if you really enjoy my videos and you want to help me have more time to make more videos, please click on my Patreon link down below. You can throw a buck or two at me and it helps give me more time to make more videos just like this one. This is Dr. Berry. I'll see you next time.